Welcome to Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed, where conversations are designed for nonprofit leaders by nonprofit leaders to inspire, educate, and motivate. Get ready to dive into the world of nonprofits where the nerdy passion and unstoppable dedication of those making a real impact is celebrated. Together with your host, Jarrett Ransom, the inspiring stories, tactical insights, and game-changing strategies of nonprofit leaders will be explored. Join us for real talk with real people. Jarrett and her guests unravel the mysteries of successful fundraising, uncover the secrets of effective advocacy, and nerd out over innovative approaches to solving social challenges. Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed is your go-to podcast for no-nonsense discussions with real-life superheroes of the nonprofit sector. Get ready to unleash your inner nerdiness and discover or rediscover how to change the world together. Now let's dive in and embrace the power of our nerdy side.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest, Melissa Steimer of Desert Foothills Library. Melissa joins me to share her experience navigating a recent CEO transition, and I really appreciate how openly and honestly Melissa shares her perspective. Career transitions can be exciting, but they can also be challenging, uncertain, and sometimes all of those things all at once. So if you're considering a transition, thinking about what might be next, or simply navigating a change in your own leadership journey, this is a conversation for you. Melissa offers a candid look at her experience. She shares the decisions that helped shape her transition and what she's learned along the way. And before we jump into this conversation, I want to give a big shout out of gratitude to Bloomerang. Thank you. Thank you for supporting these conversations and being our podcast sponsor. Now let's get into this honest and insightful conversation with Melissa Steimer. Well, hey there and welcome back. I am thrilled. I know I say that with all of my guests, but this one is a special one to me because Melissa Steimer and I have gone back, I don't know, I want to say a decade, Melissa, maybe even longer. But if you would kick us off, start by telling us a little bit about yourself and the roles, yes, that is plural, right, that you play in the nonprofit sector.
Yes, roles for sure. And thank you. Yeah, I've been living here in the Valley for 13 years, so it may be a decade that we have known each other and worked in some capacity or just have been in the same circles. So a little bit about me is I almost hate to say this, but nearly 30 years I've been in the nonprofit space. I don't consider myself that old, but I started when I went to my university. I'm an alumna of Creighton University. It's a Jesuit school, if people don't know. And I think automatically, if I look back, that taught me about service and service to others. And so it was natural for me actually to get my first job to pay for living off campus, working as in the alumni office and calling current parents, alumni, past students, and asking them for money. That's how I got started in my career. And I always feel like I've had to take different roles. As a fundraiser, you learn different skills and different types of fundraising. And as I was cutting my teeth on that early on in my career, I also was quickly being recognized at a leadership level and taking leadership roles. And really from almost the beginning was the director of development, the chief development officer. And so for me, to be able to go somewhere else and learn new skills, sometimes to get the higher pay, I hate to say it, is I had to leave. So I have taken many roles in my career, but a lot of them have come because people have asked me to join their teams. They've asked me to think about a different role that I could play or how I could help, knowing what my past experiences were. So I'm also grateful in that there's a lot of roles I did not seek out and people had come to me and I made the decision to join those organizations and so many great nonprofit organizations with great missions.
Thank you, Melissa. I remember a while back in my career and similar, like 20 plus, I'm just going to keep it plus, right? Like hearing of other leaders, what I thought, peers to me, which honestly at that time, they probably weren't, they were like well above me in their leadership trajectory. And it's like they no longer applied to openings anymore. They no longer interviewed. Like they were tapped on the shoulder and said, "Hey, we've been watching your trajectory.
Yes.
Hey, we think you'd be great in this conversation. Hey, we think you should, consider whatever." So, in today's conversation, I really want us to talk about your recent leadership transition. I imagine that most leadership transitions start long before the announcement. I know not all of them do, right? But many of them do. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious if you would be willing to share with us, Melissa, because my hope is that other leaders that are listening to this conversation can hear a little bit of themselves in this conversation, or might be navigating this right now, right? As they are having I don't know, a drive into work or whatever their commute looks like. Yes. So what prompted you to consider a new opportunity, and how did you know it was the right time, right, to take that next step in your career?
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. I don't know if I would answer that I know or had thought there was a right time. I had been thinking a lot over probably the last year about what does life look like for me as I'm nearing the 30 years in this industry and with nonprofits, and what kind of role I would want, and the value that I bring. And so as I think about kind of my end career, full-time life, I was thinking about what else would I want to do. And that's really was, just trying to understand that and thinking about what else was out there and what would I take if there was an opportunity available. But I loved where I was at. I was at, currently it's called Pause for Youth. I am so thankful I was part of really sparking the idea to rebrand. Used to be Gabriel's Angels. So I was tapped. This really starts with going backwards. When I came to the Valley 13 years ago and really was strong in my chief development officer, that marketing fundraising position, I had thought, could I consider a CEO ED role? And I really wanted to do something. If I was going to do that, I wanted to be really passionate. So I actually had left an organization as a strong CDO role and went to another organization because the leader was retiring. And I felt like, and we had a conversation that it's not a given, but as I transition out of my role, you have the opportunity to get to know the organization, get to know the board, and hopefully then you could become the successor. And that was only about a year. And it was also, I started it March of 2020, and we all know what was happening then. So a lot of change was happening. And yet I still felt like making that decision would put me on the path of that next leadership role. I will have to say I went in, did what I could during that time, interviewed when the job got posted, got down to the final two candidates, and they did not choose me, which is okay, because I also am a believer of you're meant to be where you're meant to be. That is kind of how my career has been guided for me. And I feel like when people have tapped me on the shoulders, it's, this is an opportunity you will excel at. So after that news, I started to get people calling me about the position, which is Pause for Youth. And about 5 years ago, I became their first CEO once the founder, who was there for 20 years, left. That's a really tough role to be in. You're following someone's shoes who lived and breathed this organization. And if any of you out there know founders, they work in a different way. And we all want to work hard, but there's also work-life balance. And so trying to not be that person, but know that it was so built on them giving it their all. I did the best I could for 5 years and really wanted to build a good team, try to set the organization up to show that post-founder, this organization will continue to do great things, have great mission impact, and it really did. And so I was sitting there 5 years in with an amazing team and with an amazing, the work we had been doing, still more to work on with the foundation, but I was just struggling with, is this a long-term thing? I didn't ever think it was. I'm not a person that I like change. And I actually feel like in my career, if I look back, startups, trying to evolve an organization, help it grow is kind of where I've always been placed. And I enjoy that and love that. And I was starting to see it's a great organization, but I don't know if I'm the leader for it. And so, recruiting firm, you start to be about 5 years long term. They start calling you, they start giving you opportunities. And I was getting a few. Nothing looked like I really needed to consider until I got the email about the current place where I have transitioned to, which is the Desert Foothills Library. In fact, it's a place I hadn't known about as I explored it, though, and knew it was in my community, my home. It's where I lived up here in the North Valley of Phoenix. And just as I started to learn more about it, thought, what an amazing organization. And there were so many things as I went through the process that I was ticking the box more in the pros and the cons. And I will also share for anybody, because I wasn't necessarily looking to go anywhere, it was the hardest decision of my life. I can look back now and say it was the hardest career decision for me. And whether it was the right thing or not for me, it was what I needed and what I felt like I was almost prepared to do, wanted to do, excited about doing. And so I chose to, step into the role. And I did that now almost 90 days ago. So that, is a little bit about that transition and wanting to think about whether or not that was the right thing for me. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Melissa. And yes, I do think and hope that many listeners are seeing themselves in you, hearing themselves in you rather, right? And just all of the things to consider, which brings me to my next question about those first 90 days that you just completed, right? So as you stepped into this new CEO role, what did those first 90 days teach you? I'm assuming you did a lot of listening, you worked on building trust, understanding the culture, maybe introducing changes, not introducing changes. Like really, what does that first 3-month period look like?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I would say having taken my first CEO role, a lot happened. Jarrett, you and I have spoke about that many times. Things I never would have thought happen, in all of my career with how people felt and the insecurities that might have been there from this new change and how, a new leadership was coming in. And so I was testing all of what does it look like to be a leader in that role. I learned a lot in 5 years. And so I really did my best to come in here. And yes, first and foremost, not make any changes. That was my goal. I said that to the board. They asked me for kind of more of like a 8-month plan because the way that I came on here was about 8 months left in our fiscal year. And they really wanted to know how I, would right size the ship and make sure things were moving forward. And so as I talked about that plan, it really was about listening and learning. The other thing I will share is I am not a librarian. The library world is new to me, other than I love libraries. I love what they've become because it is more than books. It's all these amazing programs that we offer. And yet for the past 2 executive directors here, they've been run by librarians. And so there was automatically a bit of a distrust or who is she? She's not a librarian. But fun fact about our library is we are the only independent nonprofit library in all of Maricopa County. So we are not on the public library system, which requires someone who understands how to lead and raise funds, because that is how this library is supported. The community supports it, all donations supported. So for me, it was really important to listen to people to understand what they've gone through, because the other thing about me as I look back on my career, I'm not afraid of going into a situation knowing there might have been a lot of turnover. There was a bit of turmoil that happened before. I feel like I've had enough of those experiences where I just roll that off my shoulders and just know what I need to do to move forward. It's not always fun and it's not always easy, but I actually thrive, I think, sometimes in those situations. And I knew that would be the case here, which it has been. I'm, like I said, almost 90 days, and really trust is going to take 90 more days, probably another 90 after that. It's going to take a while to ensure that there's trust here. But so far, I've just love what I'm doing, and I love what this library is thinking about and the plans the board has for it that excite me more than anything.
Yeah, I can imagine. And for me, I'm thinking trust isn't a one and done, right? It's not like, okay, check, I did that in the first 90 days.
No.
To me, as leaders, that is something that we're navigating constantly as changes continue to take place, right? Whether it's fiscal uncertainty or, as you mentioned, staffing uncertainty. There's so many different things that take place. You referenced one thing, but really I want to ask you, Melissa, looking back on your journey and really career, what advice would you give leaders who are considering a career transition? You've done this a couple of times, but what advice would you give them, right? And I'm thinking if they feel uncertain about leaving an organization that they've invested so much in. I mean, we talk about it, you and I, but in the sector, broadly, is we have devoted so much time, so much sweat equity into these critical missions. What advice would you impart right now?
For me, and it's interesting, we have people that came before us that their careers look like 20 years, 25 years somewhere. That has never been for me my intent, although I love the missions I work for. And this may not be the answer everybody wants to hear, but I think change is necessary. And I think it's okay to bring in thoughts about, am I the right person right now for this organization? I do think at my prior organization, I probably could have been there another couple of years and continue to do great work, but I felt myself getting a little bit, shaking a little bit in my seat about, is this where I want to be right now? And kind of thinking about that. And so I trusted my gut. I also, though, made sure I wasn't running from something. It's not about that, right? I loved what I did. I loved the organization. I think there's so many great things that will do for a community. But I also had to think about what's good for me, what's important for me. And we all go through, there's personal things that happen in our lives. There's ebbs and flows with that. I have aging parents. I have, a child that still lives at home that we have to deal with his mental health every day. So there's a lot of that brings into your perspective about where do you want to be and where do you want to spend your days? And that was really, for me, a part of it. So I would say trust your gut, also trust your heart and do what's right for you. And hopefully give people the time I gave, 6 weeks. I knew it was important that this was not going to be an easy leadership transition. If I look back, the one thing I would say is succession planning has to be talked about much sooner than it probably does. And there should be a lot of thoughtful work that goes into that. So no leader leaving for whatever reason, it becomes too hard to be able to keep that work going.
Yeah, I agree. And every situation is different for every person. But I think for me, you really speak to the awareness that you had for yourself, Melissa. I think it's hard for anyone to have that realization to say, I'm not sure this is the best place for me, or that I'm the right leader to take this organization to the next stage, or whatever the situation, might be. A lot of awareness, a lot of, well, I guess the other thing is I've heard for myself, someone said this, and it's probably like a quote that I'm remiss in knowing who said it, but really around doing what's best for you is in fact doing what's best for other people around you, right? And really just having that as one of my mantras. Well, let me ask you this other question, and you've already shared so much great insight, but I'm curious if you can share what it was like to leave one organization while preparing to lead another one. I can only imagine that comes with a unique set of responsibilities. So, how did you approach the transition to ensure that both organizations were being held and positioned for success?
Yeah, that's a great question because I don't know if I did it right. And I'm a very giving person and want to be able to start working with one organization while still giving the time and leaving another organization in good hands. So what became pretty clear to me, because I gave a pretty long runway of time that I would be transitioning out, you get an organization that is so excited and just hired the person they need and have a lot of things that are happening, which is happening here. We're embarking on a strategic plan. There's a lot of decisions being made about the future of this organization, and they want to give every opportunity for me to be a part of those discussions happening, the work that's happening. And so being able to kind of understand what I really should be spending my time in the new organization and where I really need to give my time in the organization that I left. And the one that I left, we were doing an event right at the time that I had given my notice, and it was about 2 weeks away. And so I really needed to ensure that I made sure that, the organization is in great hands and the work that is happening is great, and not give time to maybe, emails and questions and people wanting some of my time from the organization I transitioned to. But I was just very clear in that. I would share with people that this is happening right now. And so I will share my time. And I was very clear about, we had an interim director here that had been in the role for 6 months. And so for them to be able to also offload everything that they'd been working on and give me insight was really important. But I made sure I scheduled that, and I gave, a couple of time slots to that work, but not have it consume all my time, because you never want to just forget about that organization that you've left. For them too, it was a challenge, and they've got to figure out what they're doing next. So tried to balance as much as I could, but was always wanting to give my time and wanting to be in the know for the new organization. So.
Yeah, it sounds like a very thoughtful, meaningful strategy. I know that it didn't come lightly for you. I also agree that succession planning needs to be talked about well in advance, and also just normalized, right? Like, the reality is none of us are staying in our position forever. Infinity is not an option. So we need to talk about this. But anyway, I digress. That's one of my soapboxes.
Well, I can share with you, Jarrett. I mean, I felt like and knew, because I'd had discussions with someone who was my next leader at the prior organization, that, that would be something she could easily step into. And I think she would do a great job. And it wasn't until this change that I began to realize that may not be what she wants to do, or might be her consideration. At one point it was, but as she kind of went through and processed her own feelings, it might not have been. So if we hadn't really delved into that and thought about what that could look like for her to prepare her, whether it was 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, she might have felt more equipped. But that showed up in this example. So.
Yeah. And that's a great awareness as well. Like, so many different situations or opportunities could arise. Well, Melissa, you've been fantastic. I have 2 more questions, but the first one is, how can people learn more about you and also Desert Foothills Library? Where do we go? How do we connect?
Great. Well, learn more about me. I am on LinkedIn as Melissa Steimer. I'm not super active, but I try to respond and answer anybody if they message me. I love to sit down and talk with people about nonprofits and giving particularly. I have loved that my career has been in fundraising, and I get to build amazing relationships with people who give really, well, and are, want to make sure that that these missions have further impact. For the Desert Foothills Library, I would just say if you're ever in the Cave Creek area, come up into Cave Creek, no matter what you're doing. It's just a great town, but sitting up on the hill off Schoolhouse Road is this amazing library that's been here since 1954. And we do hundreds of programs each month. It's got an amazing children, youth library, as well as an adult library section, but it's really about the community that lives here and walks through the doors every day. And there is not a day I don't go by where someone will stop by or I'll hear them say at the front desk or to me, I love this library. I love this library. So it is really a special place. People have to step foot in here because it's also up in a beautiful part of Phoenix. So please, dfla.org is our website. Go take a look and come up to the library and say hi.
I've got to do it. I know I've said this on LinkedIn post and text to you, but yes, it's on my short list of places to visit.
Yeah.
I've got to. Okay, one final question. This is probably my favorite one of all of them, but if there's any final takeaway that you want to leave our listeners with today, what is it that you would want to share with them?
I think that everybody's path is different. You said this earlier. We all, aspire, if we've been particularly giving of ourselves to this nonprofit space, do what is right for you and make those decisions. Don't ever make a decision because you think the grass is greener or you may be running to something else. And like I said, I had to really think about that and understand, what was leading me to really consider this situation. And I think for me, it was, the perfect time for me. And I needed the change. I didn't know at the time I needed it, but I needed it. And it's something that I'm excited about what the future is for the library here. And just go with your gut. I think go with your gut would be one of the best things I could say, because we all know, and there's so many times we don't trust it and we know what it's telling us. So think about it hard and think about why you want to do the change and what really does it mean for you.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation. I have loved watching your journey for the 10 plus years that we've been connected, I'm sure. I wish you the absolute best of luck in this position. You seem extremely happy. They're lucky to have you. And again, thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you. Thanks, Jared. Bye-bye.